Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. In the race to be this state's next governor, Republican Congressman Byron Donalds has the endorsement of Donald Trump, a campaign war chest that has raised more than $45 million and a clear lead in every poll. And yet, in many ways, beyond his bombastic sound bites on Fox News defending the president, he is still largely unknown to many voters. Last week, before a campaign event at Versailles Restaurant in Little Havana, I sat down with Donalds on a wide range of topics, including property taxes, AI data centers, and his really strained relationship, to Ron DeSantis. But we started with his childhood and being raised by a single mother.
Well, I mean, look, I wouldn't be here without my mother. My mother did so much for me. She sacrificed a lot to help me get the best education I could. My mom was a school choice mom before school choice was a thing. She moved me out of public school very early and then made a ton of sacrifices to put me in private school so I could get the best education possible. She was a tough lady. She's tough. She was strict. She did the very best job she could do for me and for my sisters. And so I wouldn't be in the position I am today without my mother. Leaving New York was a decision as a young kid, was basically like, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go far away. I kind of looked at Florida, looked at a couple other states that I figured I was going to go to get my college education. But I can't stress enough, growing up in New York was hard upbringing, but my mother did everything.
When you say it was hard, what was the hardest part of it?
Well, we grew up poor, number one. In my neighborhood in Crown Heights, Brooklyn at the time, that was during the crack epidemic. I remember sometimes I was going to baseball practice in the morning and you would be walking down the street to go to the train station. You see crack vials all over the street corners in the early mornings before people can come out and clean them up from the night before.
Can I ask you what happened to your father?
My parents just never married. You know, things just didn't work out.
Do you have a relationship with him at all?
Yeah, we do have a relationship. We talk periodically, but I just didn't grow up with my dad.
Okay. Obviously, when you came to Florida as a young man, you did have some troubles with the law yourself.
Yeah.
You were arrested, I think, when you were 18 on a marijuana charge. What can you tell me about that?
Stupid decision. Honestly, I was walking down the street. I was leaving a party. Officers came up, asked me if I would empty my pockets. I said, yes, of course. I had a dime bag of marijuana in my pocket. That's the story. And so, you know, it's tough because there was a lot of decisions that I wish I could go back and redo from those early years. Like 18, 19, and 20 were really tough years for me. Made a lot of bad decisions that I regret. But in life, you don't just, you're not who you are at the lowest point in your life. What you do is you decide to just, push forward and try to make sure you make better decisions in the future. And I would tell people, if you examine my life since 20 years old, my life has really been a story of redemption.
And I want to talk about that redemption arc, but before I get there, I just want to be clear on a couple of things with regard to your arrest. Your ex-wife says that you were actually not just possessing drugs, but you were selling small amounts of drugs.
Yeah, it was bad decisions.
So you were.
I can't undo that decision.
So you were selling.
Yeah, for a period of time, low-level amounts, terrible decisions. Jim, like I told you, those years of my life, there are a lot of things I wish I could undo. I wish I could, but I can't do that. I was a youth leader for 12 years in my community in Southwest Florida. And what we always told the young kids is that when you mess up, you make up, but you never give up. And I messed up early on. It's one of the reasons why I spent so much of my other years in Southwest Florida mentoring young kids, serving in my church, helping them make sure they don't make the decisions that I made when I was 18. And
you had another incident with a fraud charge that related to a bank debit card, or
yes.
And again, it was something that happened when I think you were 20. In both those cases, it seemed that you received some mercy from the courts, either through a pretrial diversion program or by recognizing that you were a youthful offender, having your record sealed and eventually expunged. There has been some concern raised that, for instance, you're the sponsor of the DC Crimes Bill,
yes,
which would overhaul some of the criminal justice for youthful offenders in the District of Columbia area. And there are those who believe that the stance you're taking now is hypocritical, given that some of the very grace that you were shown in cases in Florida, you would deny to people in similar situations in the District of Columbia.
Well, listen, first let me talk to the DC Crimes Act. I'm a proud sponsor of it. The problem in the District of Columbia is that they were treating 24-year-olds as if they were juveniles. And look, I will never say that what the decisions I made when I was very young were right decisions or smart decisions. They were terrible decisions, desperate decisions. But in Florida, I had to face the music as an adult. In D.C., they were letting 20 or 4-year-olds be tried as juveniles. That's not right, Jim. It's one of the reasons why juvenile crime in D.C. is shooting through the roof. So let me be clear with you on this one. So what we did in D.C. is we said, if you're 24 years old, if you're 20 years old, if you're 19 years old, you're going to be tried as an adult in the D.C. system, not as a child.
Except I'm not sure your description of what the impact of the law is accurate. From what I understand, it doesn't necessarily mean that 18 to 24-year-olds would be tried as juveniles. It would allow people in that range, in certain cases, to have their convictions sealed and receive more flexible sentencing options at a judge's discretion.
Jim, I'm just telling you that's not true. What we did in the D.C. Crimes Act is we made sure that people who were of that age, people who are the age of maturity, the age of adulthood,
the age
were
that
going to
you
be
were,
tried. Exactly.
The age that you were.
And in Florida, I had to face the music as an adult, not as a juvenile. Now, Florida does have laws around diversion, being able to seal records, and yes, those were things that were afforded to me. And I look back on those days and I say, you know what, that helped me restart my life, so be it. But in D.C., it was very different.
When you faced that time when you were 18, 19, 20 years old, it almost seems as if the first 2 decades of your life are very different from the second 2 decades. So I want you to sort of say, what do you think was the critical moment in that? And I know that from looking at some interviews, you talk about meeting and the influence that your current wife, Erica, has on you. Talk to me about how that change came about.
Well, look, at 20, I was at a real depth in my life. I was at the bottom. And I remember very clearly I was sitting in the room one day looking up, and I said, I don't know how I got here, but I'm going to make sure that I'm never here again. And so after that point, every decision I made was about being a better man than I was before. It was about being a father to the kids that I knew I would have in the future, and being a quality husband to my wife and a leader in my community. All things that have occurred. At 21, I gave my life to Christ. It's a story out there. I've talked about it before. I actually gave my life to Christ at Cracker Barrel when I was at work. But before giving my life to Christ, the person who got me going to church was my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, Erica Lees, now Erica Donalds. And so the redemption story first was acknowledging that I was making a lot of terrible decisions as a young man, as a young kid, and that I had to do better for myself. The second was acknowledging that God is there for us every step of the way if you trust Him. And so I started going to church, and the rest is history.
I don't want to make too much of this, but it's a fact. You would be the first black Republican governor of a southern state.
Yes.
Where does race come, where does that notion that you would be the first black Republican of a southern state, does that enter into your thinking at all? Do you think, I mean, obviously you've lived your entire life as being black. I get that answer, but do you recognize that this would be significant?
I'm aware of it, but I don't really focus on it. Actually, in this entire time in politics, I've not really focused on race as a marker.
Do you think that you had an advantage of moving up in the Republican Party because you're black, because that you're someone who the Republican Party would want to champion to show their diversity?
No, and I'll tell you, actually, this race has been a little different for governor, but in any of the other campaigns I've been a part of, I was always the underdog. That's why this one's a little different. I was always the underdog. Never really the choice of donors, never really the choice of a lot of the traditional segments of the Republican Party.
I'm fascinated by the dynamic between you and the current governor. It seemed like for a long time you and he were strong allies, and then something happened. And I think it basically comes down to you endorsing President Trump and not him when he was running for the White House. How would you describe your relationship to Ron DeSantis?
It's been better, but I think it's something where you can find ways to come back together and work about what we're going to do for the future of our state.
What do you think his biggest mistake has been as governor?
He's actually done a great job. To be honest with you, Jim, I think he's done a great job. I think being in leadership is tough. When you're the person that has to make the decisions, it's hard, and it's really about just making sure I think you get as much information and input as you can. But you can't really second guess somebody who's been in that position because you've not been in that position.
Does it bother you that so many of his senior advisors, or several of his senior aides, were found to have actually be giving advice to and helping your opponent, James Fishback, someone who has been using a virulent and basically a racist attack against you, and yet there are the governor's aides who have been seen helping him and who they admit were helping him for a time.
One thing people need to understand is that the internal politics inside of political parties is probably far more vicious than the things that happen between Republicans and Democrats and independents. Look, when you get into this business, you better have Kevlar skin. Not thick skin, Kevlar skin. And so I think that's something where, if the governor chooses to deal with that, he will with his people and his team. We stay focused on just campaigning, working hard, earning the votes of the people of Florida, because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
What do you think of James Fishback's attacks on you?
Honestly, I just think it's somebody trying to get more attention than anything else. So I really don't pay much attention to him. I don't pay much attention to anybody else who's running. How I've always done my campaigns, Jim, is I stay focused on what I'm doing. I go meet the people that I'm asking for their vote for. We talk about the issues that are important to them. You can't get caught up in the distractions.
When we come back, we get into the issues. Stay with us. Welcome back. We continue our conversation with Byron Donalds, the leading Republican candidate for governor, turning to the biggest issue he may face: what to do about property taxes.
Well, I agree with the governor that we need to repeal homestead property taxes. Property taxes in our state, especially for Floridians, has doubled in the last decade. In the last 5 years, local government budgets have grown massively out of control. The dodging efforts that the CFO and the governor are doing right now are critical for the future of our state. We're going to continue those dodging efforts, and it's going to be for every form of government in the state of Florida, including the state of Florida and state agencies. Everybody has to be examined. Everybody's got to tighten their belts, because the people in our state, those who are working hard every single day, are seniors who are trying to find ways to keep their Florida dream alive, and our young people who are trying to get into the Florida dream, they don't have the cash. So we have to do this. And then the key thing is, how do you cut these budgets while making sure that sheriffs still get paid, that deputies still get paid, that firefighters still get paid, you take care of roads, you take care of land management issues. That's the balance that we're going to have to strike.
I just want to be clear, because when you make a statement like you want to end all homesteaded property taxes, does that include homesteaded property taxes that go to school districts?
Yes, and then we talk about school districts. And let me talk about school districts now. The biggest people who've actually increased property taxes on the hardworking men and women of our state are school districts. But let's also acknowledge the reality, Jim. Miami-Dade Public Schools, their populations are decreasing. Same in Broward County, same in Hillsborough County, same in Collier County where I live, Lee County, Florida, etc. And the reason why their populations are decreasing is because of universal school choice, which the legislature finally passed a couple years ago, which is something I fully support. I've been a school choice champion and advocate my entire time in politics. That's not going to change. But the fiscal reality is that the school districts have less students today than they did when we passed universal school choice, yet at the same time, their budgets have expanded because they're collecting far more property taxes than they ever have.
It sounds great to tell people we want to do away with your property taxes and we're not going to affect sheriffs or police officers. I don't know how you can do that without affecting a lot of services, including police and fire. But how do you pay for roads? How do you pay for parks, libraries? Aren't all those issues that are important to people?
They are all important and they're all critical. But let's talk about DOGE first, and I'll come to the key services you're talking about. When it comes to DOGE, they are starting this process of examining all these budgets. I'm aware of the governor and the CFO's formula. It's a good formula to start with. What we want to do is say, let's take that formula as a baseline and then do a 5-year running analysis of every budget in our state, examining line items, and then making sure that the public is aware of where to find all this information so they can examine it in real time and talk to their local officials. Jim, this was what I did for my career. I spent 17 years in banking, insurance, and financial services. So if you're going to talk about long-run financial analysis, which is what DOGE essentially is, then this is one of the reasons why I'm uniquely suited to be Florida's next governor.
There's a policy now in Florida to where if a school district is because of declining population, has free space, that charter schools can lay claim to some of those classroom space and operate in them. Should those charter schools or the management companies that operate them pay the school districts, since they're using classrooms, since they're using libraries, cafeterias, using their janitorial services to help clean up the school? Should the charter schools have to pay something some negotiated fee to the school districts for the use of those classrooms?
I think something can be negotiated, but let's acknowledge that when school districts collect property taxes, that is for the education of children, the facilities for these children in the community that they're in. Miami-Dade collects property taxes from every resident for public school buildings and facilities. So this isn't money that the school districts just have of their own volition. They didn't create this money out of thin air. They tax the people of Florida in order to have money to house students for the purpose of education and to pay for the physical plant and the maintenance of these facilities. So could something be negotiated? Sure, of course.
Should something be negotiated?
I think so. I think something should be negotiated. I think something could be negotiated. But let's be also very clear. I don't think it's right for school districts to go to charter schools and say you have to pay market rents, because let's be honest, the school district isn't paying market rents. They're taxing citizens to get that money to pay for education, and that's what we want to do as a society, but that is taxpayer money. It is not school district money.
You said, obviously, you've been a major proponent for charter schools for a long time, school
Yes.
choice. Your wife is also very involved in it, has been for a long time.
Yes.
Used to serve on a school board, has operated certain management companies and is involved. I think in one of your disclosure forms, you had said in recent years she has made more than $1 million in salary and other benefits from her time working for companies related to charter schools. If you're elected governor, will your wife continue to operate businesses related to charter schools and schools in general? Do you see that as a potential conflict of interest?
Oh, well, let's address the last part of your question. My wife is actually not really managing those schools anymore. She started those schools. Those management contracts have been turned over to other entities. My wife, who's a businesswoman, not just education, my wife was a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and a Chief Compliance Officer for an investment management firm out of New York. She did that job, worked her way up from the bottom like a lot of people did. She's a professional, she's a businesswoman. We are gonna make sure, number one, that she's not gonna have any businesses with the state of Florida. That's not going to happen. Number two, we will comply with all laws, and we will make sure that there are clear boundaries for what my wife's businesses are versus my responsibility of governing the state of Florida.
So you envision that she will continue to have some role in the business community. She's not just going to be First Lady. She's actually going to continue to have a career in which she's working for companies, and you're saying that those companies will not have business with the state of Florida?
Yeah, those businesses will not have, her businesses will not work with the state of Florida. I want to be very clear on that. That is not going to happen because obviously that just doesn't look good, Jim, and we're not going to do that. The second thing is my wife is a professional. She's an accountant by trade. Like I said, she was a chief financial officer for an investment firm. She's a very accomplished woman. I mean, honestly, I'm lucky. You know, I kind of hit the jackpot in the game of life with my wife, Erica. She's awesome. Also, I would tell you, this might be the first time in Florida history where the First Lady is a professional who owns businesses. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's something to be celebrated.
I want to talk about data centers for a second.
Yeah.
That's become an issue that 2 years ago, if you had asked about data centers, nobody would know what you were talking about. Now it's suddenly become a major topic here in Florida, and I think it's going to be an increasing topic here in this race. You were recently supported by a PAC, the Leading the Future PAC, that has promised $5 million to support your governor's campaign because they want more data centers being built. There are obviously issues related to those data centers in terms of electricity and their use of water. And the DeSantis administration is right now trying to push for having a lot of regulation on those data centers. Talk to me about your vision for how data centers fit into the future of Florida.
Well, two things. I want to make sure we talk data centers, but then I also want to talk AI, because I think a lot of times the two get confused and conflated. With data centers in particular, my position is similar to President Trump's position. He announced it the other day. Data centers need to be able to generate their own power on site. I think that's important. We don't want to see electricity bills for the people of Florida go up because of new AI data centers, hyperscale data centers in the state of Florida. Number two, with water. The new designs for a lot of these centers are actually significantly better with water usage. We want to make sure that we're protecting Florida's environment. When I was in the State House and also in the U.S. House, I've always supported the funding necessary for the Central Everglades Restoration Plan and also for protecting Florida's environment. We want to make sure that if these centers are built in Florida, that they're still protecting Florida's environment. So that's data centers. Is there a pathway to do it in our state? Yeah, but there are two lines that have to meet. We got to make sure are handled.
Before you move to AI,
Sure.
I just want to drill down on one of the points you said,
Sure.
producing electricity.
Yes.
I think that you've talked about before about increasing the use of small modular nuclear reactors.
Yes.
So you envision a scenario in which the state of Florida will get more aggressive in terms of building new nuclear facilities in the state?
I think so. It's without question. The future of any economy always is based on power. If you have baseload power, you can grow an economy. If you don't have baseload power, your economy shrinks. We were talking about affordability earlier. Well, if Florida doesn't address its future power needs, how are we going to have the jobs for the young people who want to build their dream in Florida? It just doesn't come together, Jim. So we are going to have to address baseload power. And let me be also clear, solar plants and wind farms do not address baseload power. That's intermittent at best. It's far more expensive. It doesn't decrease the per kilowatt hour that every Floridian's going to have to pay. So we do need small modular reactors. We need them.
I mean, when you talk about building nuclear facilities,
yes,
it can scare some people. It can also concern some people as to what regulations are going to be surrounding them and all those sorts of things. Talk to me about what protections are there going to be when you start talking about building small nuclear reactors around the state?
Jim, these are the same
being built by private companies, by the way, for their data centers.
Understood, Jim. Listen. This is the same technology that has been sitting on our nuclear subs for the last 80 years in the United States of America. And our Navy men weren't coming home with green eyes and yellow hair. Well, except if they were blonde, they probably had yellow hair. But nobody was coming home with green eyes. The same nuclear reactors that are in the belly of every nuclear sub in our fleet is the same technology around small modular reactors and micronuclear reactors. The Department of War is looking at this right now in terms of trying to figure out how to facilitate power needs if there's a forward operating base or for national emergencies. This is energy, quite frankly, that the United States, we were the pioneers of this through the Manhattan Project. We should be leveraging this for the future of our state. So if you want to talk about data centers and making sure people don't have to come out of pocket for more in their electricity bills, I think small modular nuclear reactors are an answer to that question.
Vaccinations.
Yes.
Florida law currently requires immunizations for polio, diphtheria, measles, rubella, whooping cough, and mumps for entry and attendance in Florida schools. Yes. The DeSantis administration has been advocating doing away with those requirements. What is your position when it comes to vaccinations for school kids? Well,
there's two sets of vaccinations. One are the vaccines that have come in through rulemaking that have not gone through a legislative process. I agree with the governor and the Surgeon General that list of vaccines in the rulemaking process should be informed consent for parents. The core vaccines that you listed, the biggest ones among them, polio and MMR, I still believe that those should be requirements to attend schools. I do. I think the bigger issue for a lot of mothers in particular who are concerned about vaccines is how the vaccine schedule has just been overloaded on infants the second they come into the world. I have 3 sons, so this is something that my wife and I have looked at personally. The vaccination schedule for my 22-year-old son was not as impactful as the vaccine schedule for my 14-year-old son. So I think in part we should spread out that vaccination schedule. There are some core vaccines like polio and MMR that I think are important. Frankly, in Southwest Florida, there's a measles outbreak right now. Yeah. There's one happening right now. So I think MMR is important to continue. These are things that myself and the legislature will go through, and it will be based upon the information and the data, not just historically, but the stuff today as well.
Would you keep Latipo? You wouldn't keep Latipo as your Surgeon General, would you?
It's possible. I mean, look, I know Dr. Latipo. He's done a very good job for the state of Florida. But let's actually be focused on the campaign and win first, and then we'll talk about that.
If you would like to see the complete interview, we posted it online at cbsmiami.com. Just search Byron Donalds.